The movie starts in a convenience store in Los Angeles late at night. A small-time drug dealer named Nick is trying to choose a coffee flavor. His ex-lover Dallas and his fellow hitman Billy Hill are getting impatient and tell him to hurry up. Nick finally picks chocolate macadamia flavor, but the dispenser is empty. He complains to the cashier, who suggests he choose another flavor. Nick reluctantly fills a cup with hazelnut coffee and goes to the counter. While paying, he asks for his free cake, but the cashier says the free cake is only for 20-ounce coffees. This frustrates Dallas, so she pulls out her handgun and shoots the cashier. Not long after, they notice a police car approaching the convenience store. Nick pretends to be a cashier, while Dallas and Billy act like customers. A police officer comes in for coffee. The group hides a dead body from the officer at first, but he soon sees blood on the floor. With no other choice, they kill the officer too. The scene then moves to Texas. We meet Casey, who used to be a drug dealer with Nick. Casey has changed his life and is now married to his beautiful wife, Christine. They are planning to adopt a child. One Thursday morning, Casey gets a call from Nick. Nick asks if he can stay at Casey's house for a few days. Casey feels uneasy about it but agrees when Nick says he is getting married. Later, while making breakfast, Casey tells Christine about Nick coming to stay with them. Christine is confused because Casey never talked about his friend before. But she doesn't have time to talk about it because she's running late for work. Before leaving, she tells Casey that she'll be late that night because she has dinner plans with her boss. She also reminds him about an appointment with Dr. Jarvis from the adoption agency. At exactly 8 o'clock, Nick arrives at Casey's door and the two friends are very happy to see each other after a long time. Nick asks Casey about what he's been up to, and Casey says he's now an architect. Nick is surprised to hear this and says Casey seems more boring now compared to how he used to be. After a short while, Nick mentions he needs to run some errands and asks to borrow Casey's car because his own car has a flat tire. Casey agrees without hesitation and Nick leaves with the car keys. Later, Casey goes back to work but he can't concentrate. He notices one of Nick's suitcases in the guest room, the same one they used for drugs before. Suspicious, Casey decides to open it. His suspicion is confirmed when he finds heroin inside. Angry, he calls Nick and confronts him for bringing drugs into his home. Casey demands Nick to leave immediately, but Nick says he can't because of unfinished business. Casey threatens to call the police and hand over the drugs, but Nick remains unfazed. Furious, Casey throws the drugs in the garbage. At 11:55, the doorbell rings. Casey answers it to find a pizza delivery boy. He tells them he didn't order pizza, but unexpectedly, the delivery person punches him and holds him at gunpoint. The delivery person turns out to be a Jamaican Rasta hitman named Ice. Ice asks about the drugs, to which Casey reveals that he has already disposed of it. This prompts Ice to contact his boss, who orders him to eliminate Casey. After hanging up the phone, Ice aims the gun at him, but Casey suggests that they smoke some ganja together before he dies. Ice can't say no to this proposition, so he agrees. As they smoke, Ice opens up about himself. He says that he aspires to be a rapper and is involved in killing business just for the sake of money. An hour passes by, during which both of them consume a lot of weed. Ice then gets up and tells Casey that it's time. He is about to kill Casey when his cell phone rings. It's from one of his friends who asks him to perform a rap over the phone. Ice hesitantly agrees and proceeds to deliver his rap. Casey takes advantage of this distraction and knocks Ice down. He then ties the hitman with duct tape and keeps him in his garage. Shortly after, the doorbell rings again. Casey answers it to find Dr. Jarvis waiting outside. In his stoned state, Casey hastily clears the remnants of drugs from the table and sprays air freshener around the room before inviting the doctor inside. It turns out that Dr. Jarvis is here to interview Casey and evaluate if he's fit to adopt a baby. Casey nervously answers the first few questions, but Dr. Jarvis is particularly curious about what Casey did when he lived in Los Angeles. Casey tries his best to cover up his past as well as his recent encounter with Ice. Midway through the interview, Dallas shows up at Casey's house, believing that Nick has left some money along with the heroin. Casey tells her that Nick isn't home and asks her to leave, but she barges in anyway. Thinking that Dallas is Casey's friend, Dr. Jarvis welcomes her and requests to ask her a few questions. She promptly agrees and reveals Casey's past life as a ruthless drug dealer who was not afraid of anyone and would kill without hesitation. After hearing about Casey's criminal past, Dr. Jarvis feels uncomfortable and decides to leave, unlikely to approve Casey for child adoption. Casey tries his best to stop him, but Dr. Jarvis does not listen and walks away. As soon as he departs, Dallas holds Casey at gunpoint and ties him to a chair. She then asks about the money that Nick brought with him. Casey claims that he knows nothing about it because he quit this business many years ago. Here, it is finally revealed why Casey quit his criminal life. A flashback shows him and Nick in the middle of a drug deal that went wrong, resulting in a shootout where Casey unintentionally killed a woman who was 8 months pregnant. The guilt overwhelmed him, leading him to quit. Dallas mocks him for his story and intends to wait for Nick to return, planning to get intimate with Casey until then. Casey refuses, claiming that he is a married man, but Dallas does not care. She undresses herself and forces herself on Casey. In the middle of this assault, Billy breaks in and shoots her from behind, splashing blood all over Casey's face. Billy is also here for the money. He tells Casey that Nick had stolen $2 million from the cops and had it hidden somewhere. Believing that Casey knows where the money is, Billy plans to torture him with a saw and a blowtorch to reveal its location. As he brags about his prowess and technique of cauterization, they hear police sirens. Billy immediately hides his tools and goes to check. In the meantime, Casey loosens the duct tape around his wrists and grabs a frying pan before he sits back down in the same position. Billy comes back and tells him that the police came to raid the house next door. He again picks up his torture tools and notices the duct tape on the floor. However, before he can do anything, Casey smacks him several times with the frying pan until he gets knocked out. Casey then grabs a handgun and aims at Billy's head, but he remembers that he is not the same person anymore. Instead, he takes Billy to the garage and ties him upside down like ice. A short while later, Nick calls Casey from a payphone and confides that things didn't work out as he anticipated. He apologizes to Casey for everything and admits he had stolen the heroin and money from the police. Nick's breaking voice makes Casey sense that something is wrong. He asks about the matter, but Nick simply replies that he is leaving the country and bids goodbye. As they hang up the phone, it is revealed that Nick has been shot and is dying from blood loss. Following this, Casey cleans himself and his blood-covered house. At 5 o'clock, a corrupt cop named Cl4pped arrives at the house with a bag in his hand. It turns out that Cl4pped is the same person from whom Nick stole the money. Upon entering, Cl4pped reveals the contents of the bag: Nick's severed head. Like Dallas and Billy, Cl4pped also asks about the money's whereabouts, but Casey still claims he has no idea. The cop says that he believes Casey but expects him to know where his friend would have hidden the money. He then presents Casey with an ultimatum. If he can find the money by 7 p.m., he will erase all records of the Thursday incident, blackmailing Casey regarding the dead body and the captives in his garage, of whom he is well aware. Cl4pped asks where he has hidden the captives, and Casey leads him to the garage. The cop wastes no time in mercilessly shooting the hanging people to death. He then tells Casey to dispose of them, as it is garbage day. Once the cop leaves, Casey continues to clean the house. Following Cl4pped's suggestion, he mutilates the dead bodies and disposes of them in the trash can outside his house. Upon returning to his house, he notices Nick's car parked outside. He suddenly remembers the flat tire that Nick mentioned earlier. Casey checks his car and finds the money hidden in the spare tire. In addition, he also finds a small gift box left by Nick, who was unable to attend Casey's wedding. When he opens the package, he finds 2 watches, one for Christine and one for himself. Later, Casey takes Ice's phone and calls Ice's boss. He tells him that the heroin will be sold at Casey's house at 7 p.m., setting a trap for the Jamaican gang and corrupt cops. Casey grabs a suitcase full of money, gets into Dallas's Lamborghini, and goes to pick up his wife Christine. At 7 p.m., the Jamaican gang and corrupt cops arrive at Casey's house and end up shooting each other, just as Casey planned. Meanwhile, Casey meets Christine at the airport. She's surprised to see him and asks why he's there. Casey tells her he's leaving for France and wants her to come with him. Christine realizes Casey's in trouble but isn't sure what to do because she has her career here and loves Casey. Thinking she won't go with him, Casey decides to leave alone. But Christine stops him just in time and decides to go with him. She asks for details, and Casey promises to explain everything on their way. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. See you on the next video.